Hello. So right now I want to talk about this thing called love your enemies. We've seen that in the Bible called love your enemies. When you I've learned through working with myself, when you read things like this in the Bible, it's not talking about loving something that's outside of yourself. It's not talking about loving something outside of yourself. What it's really talking about is self-acceptance, and I work on that every single day. I work on it every single day. And because of what I've been through in the last 2 years, I realized that everything that's going on with me is has to do with my shadow. And I still have a lot more to learn, but I feel like I even created my own simulation. I literally feel like I created it because I can add stuff and take away and add stuff and take away to make my life completely different. Nobody else, even when I speak to God, I'm talking to a version of myself that is in like presence that's not in time. I'm talking to a part of me who is not in time. I literally feel like I am the one who created the simulation. But when I say me, I'm not talking about the me like the where my consciousness is right now. Because where my consciousness is right now, I cannot create something so. But where I am right now is still a part of who I am in the God realm. Like we're still one. We're still one. So when I learned to love my enemies, it's because I believe it was a Neville Goddard. It's Neville Neville, and his last name is Goddard, Goddard. And I just saw a thumbnail. I saw it a couple of years ago saying that everything is you pushed out. Everything is you pushed out because everything begins in the innerverse. The innerverse. And then with us having a perception that everything is outside of us, then everything that's on the innerverse or the inside of us, we start to see manifest on what you think is the physical realm or the outside, which really is still inside. It's really manifesting in time. I call it time. When we see it manifesting on the outside, it's really manifesting in what's called time. Because the inner world is not necessarily in time, but the outer world of the so-called physical is time. It's time, but it's everything that's already going on within. Okay, I talked about parents and how having to release parents and nasty mothers, and I talk about releasing them and just like kind of just especially when I talked about an example of somebody and an example of my parents too, but somebody else who's a YouTuber whose mother did so many low down things to them. And it said it'd be good to separate. Because I'm going to tell you something. Even though I've come to the realization that I pretty much created my own world, even from, you know, who gave birth to me and everything, like everything is basically me creating because it comes from a much higher version of myself. Everything I've been through come from a much higher version of myself. But the point is though, when you are at a certain level of consciousness, you might not realize that's what it is. And sometimes you do have to separate yourself from what it appears to be people who harm you. You have to separate yourself in order to clear your mind. And so, and even now where I am now, I don't want to be around people who are going to be nasty to me or who are going to be harmful. Like I wouldn't want to be around that now. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a comfortable situation, you know. But those things kind of come to us to teach us a lesson, and when you finally learn the lesson, you realize it has everything to do with self acceptance. Um, but yeah, definitely, I still mean what I say because when you are at a certain level of consciousness, when it comes to family members and when it comes to somebody who's unhealthy for you, it's messing with your psyche, and it's messing with how your physical reality plays out. And so sometimes it's good to separate yourself from those type of things in order to clear your mind. You know how you say hindsight is 2020, and it's like you're not really having the hindsight when you constantly are in the middle, in the thick of the situation. You're not really having the hindsight, and you're not really, when you're in the thick of it, it's almost like your mind is cloudy. And when you get out of it, then you start to understand more of why you dealt with it. But you have to get out of the situation, and you have to get to a point where you don't want to be surrounded, and you don't want to be around those type of energies. Well, I talk about love your enemies. Uh, it's basically self-acceptance. Basically, love your enemies. It's basically getting to a point of love type of frequency. And it's not about an emotional love. It's not about emotionally loving who you think is on the outside of you. It's not about an emotional love, because see, that's what a trap is. I feel, in my opinion, based on the particular work I do on myself, I feel like people confusing love your enemies with actually having a human emotional type of love for who you think you see on the outside of you. I feel like it's an emotional trap. It's a way to trap you, because that's not what that means. Love your enemies is basically, to me, self-acceptance. Because everything, like Neville Goddard, everything is you pushed out. So everything that is shown on the physical, what we experience on the physical, is a result of what's happening in the inner world. So when you love your enemies, is really you getting into a more of a love frequency and a self acceptance, and then your outer world will start to look much different. So that's love your enemies. It's really not necessarily your enemy, but that's how people said it. That's how the Bible said it, and that's how it's said, because we have a perception. We had a perception for so long of everything being on the outside of us. So the Bible, but really, what the Bible is really, everything the Bible is talking about is how to really become one with your soul. And he says, but yeah, yeah, it's basically self acceptance. Is basically realizing everything we experience has a lot to do with our inner world, and we really have complete control over our experiences once we start to know thyself. Once we start to get more into self-awareness, we will realize that we have complete control over everything in our reality, including if there's going to be a president or not, including if there's going to be another virus outbreak or not. Once we start to have more knowledge of self, we realize we have control over that, and if we don't want to experience that, we don't have to. Okay, but then it's like you got to get to a point of self-acceptance. So self-acceptance is like accepting where you are in the moment, because it's all has to do with who you are at that particular time. And honestly, that would have to do with anxiety, depression, and fear. Like, don't let nobody tell you what not to have. When somebody say no, don't have fear, because when you have fear, you magnify those things to you. But as if that's what you're experiencing at that moment, you can't allow somebody to tell you what not to have if that's what you're experiencing. Like, if that is your experience, you cannot allow somebody to tell you what not to have, because that is your experience. So and it's like it's a part of self-acceptance. The same way joy and happiness and wealth is a part of who you are, so could be depression, so could be anxiety. I realize, those can all could be called entities. The same way happiness is an entity, so is depression, and so is anxiety. The same way, all of those are entities. Those are different parts of the self. But the true self realizes that When I said in my last video, I realized that I'm none of those things, is because I was talking about that the part of me that is pure awareness. The part of me that is pure awareness is none of those things. They're all an experience. Okay. But self acceptance meaning you're accepting all parts of the self. It can be so complicated, but then when you really get into more knowledge, it becomes easier and easier. And so that's why I named my other channel called Journey into Highest Potential, because it's a journey. Now you can have some people, like I listened to one lady who already who seems to have more knowledge when it comes to that type of area. But then when you start to gain more knowledge and then you see somebody else don't have as much as what they have, you got to be careful not to put down another person. And sometimes when I listen to her, I like to listen to her because I do learn. But it's almost like use caution, because you don't want to put down or be kind of condescending towards somebody else who might not have your knowledge, your level of knowledge where you are, because they are not where you are. You want to be careful not to be condescending. And sometimes when I listen to her responses, because they're not where she is, then it's almost like she's kind of putting them down for not being where she is. But that shows that she still has to grow too. See, that's the whole point. That still shows that you have to grow too, because just because those people are not where you are does not mean that they are less than you, because then you come back with a response of being very condescending. But that only shows that there's still room to grow, that you're never finished growing, you know? Uh, so I'm saying that uh, there's that part that is self acceptance, and self acceptance meaning to accept your experiences, including fear, including anxiety, including depression, including bipolar disorder, including schizophrenia, including joy, including happiness, including wealth, including poverty, including all of that bliss. Well, bliss is when you realize it's all an experience and you don't hold on to it. When you get into bliss, you start to release it, because you realize it's all an experience, and the real you is not actually those things. It's a part of an experience. See what I'm talking about? It can become complicated, because it sounds like at 1 minute I'm saying, well, so you have to accept that you are these things, but when I talk about bliss and pure awareness, you realize you're not really those things. You know, so it sounds like what do you call it? What's that word? Contradicting. It sounds like contradicting, but it's really not. And so that's what I'm talking about. How when you get to more knowledge, then it all starts to make sense. But yeah, so when I was talking about the mothers and stuff like that, or just people in general in your life, um, I realized in the last 2 years of my work, and I've been going the stuff that I've been going through, it was literally almost like a return, like a Saturn return. And really, what my experience is with a Saturn return is really your own shadow. It's stuff that's going on in your own shadow that has come back to. It's almost like it's like you have to deal with it. It's like a dark night of the soul. Like you have to deal with these things. And even when I was talking about Leah, and I said what's going on is her own shadow is coming back too. It seems like her own shadow is attacking her. Like she is one person, and her shadow is another person, and her shadow doesn't realize it's her. Her shadow sees herself and my shadow too, but I'm starting to become one with my shadow. See, self acceptance. But when you're not in a process of self-acceptance, your shadow sees itself as a whole different person from you. And depending on what's going on in your shadow, it feel like it needs to attack you. And so what I said is everything in her shadow seems like a lot that's in her shadow is mostly her mother. And her mother seems to be very to oppose her. Her mother just opposes her, you know. And that's all what's going on in her shadow. And so what's happening to me look like in her life is, well, not right now. I'm talking about the way she described it in certain videos. I don't know what's going on in her life right now. But just the way she described it in certain videos, it sounds like, because it's been my experience already, and that's the reason why I can pick up on it, because I've already dealt with it and still dealing with it. um Her shadow has come back to attack her because her shadow is programmed to kill her, to attack her. My shadow programmed to kill me because that has been my foundation. Family doing rituals, killing me, trying to sacrifice me to other organizations. And so my whole reality has been made up of people who seem to oppose me, don't really support me. Um, like like I can't be heard. I don't have a voice. And that's literally what I've been going through since childhood. Is a family, especially a mother in particular and a brother, but the mother started it. And like they don't want me to be happy, they don't want me to have a life, they don't want me to have a love life, they don't want me to have a house or a home, they don't want me to have money, a car to drive in, a pot to piss in, or anything, nothing. And so when you have that kind of foundation from your family and you don't realize what it is, that whole thing creates this entity called your shadow. And your shadow has all this stuff in it with all these even all of the mental stuff. It's all in the shadow. And it gets to a point where the shadow don't realize that it's you. It sees itself as a separate entity from you. It's basically the movie called Us. If you think about the movie called Us with Jordan Peele, not with the director of the movie called Us, I think it's Jordan Peele. I think he's the director. And that's the movie with Lupita Nyong'o. Okay, that's with her. It's a movie called Us, and it showed her in a different version of her where they were coming to attack each other. But really, that version of her that appeared to come and attack her was her shadow attacking her, because her shadow saw itself as a different entity. So basically, when I'm talking about the thing with that Leah, what I was talking about, and myself, it's basically the same thing as the movie called Us. Like, it's basically your shadow don't see itself as you, but it's programmed to come to kill you. Hmm. But anyway, so it's basically forcing you to deal with those things, and really forcing you to it's really forcing you to ascend, to get back into who you really are. You know, it's really forcing you back into oneness. It's literally pushing you back into oneness. But yeah, but we don't see it like that, because when we saw the movie called Us, it looked like it was two separate people. You saw Lupita and Lupita Nyong'o's character herself, and this other version that looked just like her that was coming to kill her, but it's really her shadow. Okay, and it's pushing you back into oneness and self acceptance, basically loving your enemies, push getting you back into oneness, like to not see yourself as separate from all of those things. You are one with all that is. You are one with all there is. It's getting you back into oneness, self acceptance. But until you get into that type of consciousness, sometimes, especially when it comes to a person who antagonizes you, sometimes you have to separate from that which antagonizes you to be able to see. But see, the thing is, when you call yourself, when you separate, like say if it's a mother, when you separate yourself from your mother, you have to deal with the issue. And you have to be careful not to hate them, because, and this is something I still work on, you have to be careful, um, not to have, not to harbor feelings towards the things that they've done, because even though you separate them from them physically and you might not ever speak to them again, they still affect your life, because the other people that come into your life will still have that same kind of energy. I was listening to Leah talking about how she was trying to get into a new place, and she talked about how the black woman, the sister, wouldn't help her. But then she got in touch with a white woman that helped her do everything. Now, in my case, I don't have black people, white people, Asian people, don't matter who it is. That energy seems to return, and it comes in the form of people who can be black, white, no matter who they are. Until I deal with uh until I deal with the shadow, that same energy can come back in the forms of people who look all kind of different ways. So, but for her, just from that example, when she said the lady didn't want to help her, the sister didn't want to help her find a place, it put me, it reminded me, it's like that's the energy of her mother all over again. That's her shadow. That is her mother all over again. But it come in the form of this lady who don't want to help her. That's her mother. But even if it was a white lady, it's still her mother. If it was a white man or a black man, it's still her mother. It's like that energy just seems to continue to return. That's because that's her foundation, and because that's her foundation, and because your mother, I'm not going. Your mother is your first teacher, so basically that's her foundation, and because that is her root, then that energy continues to return in different people, and it's like you can't escape it. So you can physically separate from people who do these things, but you still have to deal with the issue because it's still your foundation. Because if you don't deal with the foundation and change the foundation, then it's going to continue to, you're going to continue to have patterns. Same thing with poverty, honestly, because a person can be rooted in poverty, have a foundation of poverty, and then they can have these up and down roller coasters where they seem to go up and down and up and down. I'm gonna tell you something. I don't have a foundation of poverty. Poverty. Some of the poverty I've dealt with comes from family wishing harm on me. They don't want to see me succeed. But my life coming up is nothing. Has nothing. Is physical. It's not poverty at all. It's basically like we were the We were the Huxtables. Like we were the Huxtables. I did not have a hard upbringing as far as financial wise. So my thing going on with the poverty has a lot to do with hmm how can I say it? The way my shadow has dealt with me, because I get attacked by my shadow quite a bit when I try to do something to get money, and it's like literally I feel the attacks like they stick me, like I get feel like these thumbtacks sticking me, all these entities sticking me when I decide to go do something that will make my life better. Than I get hit. That's how my shadow is dealing with me. Um, it's not because of how I grew up. It's because I grew up with a household that I thought loved me, but they hated me. So my foundation is not necessarily not having money. My foundation is that nobody loves me. That's my foundation. Nobody loves me, and it's though that's not true. Like I know it's not true. That's my foundation from childhood. Nobody loves me. So it's not. I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Okay, but my foundation is I fucking hate it. That's my foundation is I fucking hate it. I would rather grow up in the fucking projects than to have a foundation that nobody fucking loves me. I would rather grow up in the projects. I literally, um, like I hear people talk about because I kind of come from money. My parents were doctors. But when you have a foundation that you you deserve to be abused and you deserve to be hated, I would rather grow up digging through trash cans. Well, no, you go through trash cans and you don't feel the love. But like, let's think about good times. let's think about good times. I don't want to talk about trash cans. If you got to dig through trash cans, you ain't feeling loved. Okay, you just not feeling loved. Or if you laying on the streets, you're not feeling loved at that moment. You're just not feeling it. I don't care who say that you's loved, you ain't feeling it. But let's think about the show called Good Times. Even though they were poor, there was a lot of love up in that house. Even though they were poor. And that's what I'm talking about right there. When you have a foundation of love, you're going to get the money. But when you have a foundation of hate, then it's hard to come up. It's like I'm in ups and downs. It's like it's hard to reach. It's hard to get to my destiny. It's hard to see my dream become real because my foundation is hate. Even with good times, their foundation is not even poverty because poverty is not about physically having money. So I would have to say my foundation was poverty. I grew up physically in a household of money, but my foundation was poverty. My foundation was poverty. You know, that's been my foundation. It because like you think about the show called Good Times, or think about how you know I've seen people do these interviews where they grew up in the Caribbeans, like they were raised in the Caribbean, their childhood was in the Caribbean, and they were poor, but they didn't know they were poor. You see what I'm talking about? So poverty is not their foundation because you did not even know you were poor. So poverty is not your foundation. Poverty is has everything to do with the mind. It's not what you physically have, it's literally in the mind. And when you're surrounded by love, you don't know that you're poor. When you're surrounded by love, you don't really know that you're poor. Okay? Um but when you might have money, you might grow up in money in a big house, but then you're surrounded by people who want to tear you down, then it's almost like it's still a poverty mindset. Mm, you know. Um, but yeah, so when I hear people talk about how they had to work hard coming up and how they didn't have a whole lot of money, I want to question what was their household like. Um, because if you had a household full of love, you were rich. And it's just really it has always annoyed me when they think I had it so much better than they did. It was always so annoying that they really felt like money was everything in the world. That they look at me and like no matter what I could have gone through in life, I still have it good, you know. But yet and still, there was a long time when I did not have my mind because my family worked hard to mess up my mind. And when I say work hard, on top of what could be physical abuse, they did a lot of rituals. They did a lot of mental abuse, not so much causing anxiety and depression. They did that, but I'm talking about making me what you call that, um like almost to the point of retardation. I'm talking about that kind of like not having my mind. I forget the word for it, but like to the point of where you don't, where you're not. See, when I took tests to get into normal classes, though, I always passed. But the way I would interact with people, like I could pass a test and study and pass a test, and I could make A's and stuff. But for some reason, it's almost like the way I interact with people, it's almost like to the point of like I don't catch on, you know. Um, but I don't remember being that way before the age of 5. Like I have memories of age of 4, 3, 4. I have memories of how I interacted, and I was very vibrant. I was very organized. I always like to read. I always like to study, and I was excellent with money management. I remember if I would find a penny, I would have a piggy bank, and I would put every coin I find in the piggy bank. I remember being very organized. I remember being on the high part of who I am. Well, some people can say your sign. What my sign is, I remember being having all the positive aspects of what my sign was in 3D. Okay, but I remember when I got to the age of 7, that's when I slowly started dying, and it's almost like what somebody described to me. It's like literally, by the time I was 11, I was literally dead. When I say dead, I mean dead. Like, no, I was dead. They killed me. My family killed me, and I was only a shell. I was killed, and I was completely turned my back to myself, and I was the negative aspects of my side. I was all of the negative aspects of my side because of the spiritual work they did as since I was a child. And what that did was created my shadow, and now my shadow literally is a separate entity that comes to kill me, because that created my the shadow don't create itself. All your experiences is creating your shadow, and my shadow comes to kill me because that's what it's created to do. And like wanting love, even if I want a puppy or whatever, it tries to stop me from those things because that's what it's created to be. It's a separate consciousness. But then I have to learn to get into self acceptance. Then the shadow won't fight me no more. But the people who felt like I had it made because I had money, I would like to know what it's like to have a mind. I would like to know what it's like to always be in your right mind. Because even though, I mean, people got their problems, I get the people, everybody has their problems mentally. They still knew what it was like to be somewhat normal. I had a hard time interacting with humans. It's like I was always awkward. People can call it autism. I've been in autistic groups, and let me tell you something. Those people who actually have real experience with autism and who have children with autism, because I've been in the groups, I've been in the meetups. They tell me my story ain't adding up, and they tell me I do not have autism. That's what they tell me. Not black people. Black people don't really like to. I never seen black people in those groups. These are all white folks. Um, when I tell them my story, it don't add up, and they tell me, "No, you don't have autism, even Asperger's. No, no, that don't seem like that's what you have. Seems like you've been through some trauma in your life." That's what they tell me. It's like this is not some kind of developmental disorder. This is trauma. Even though I have had the symptoms of autism and Asperger's, when I've been to the groups, like, you sound like you've been through trauma. You ain't got autism. My child has autism. You don't have autism. You sound like you've been through a lot of trauma. That's what. Now, they don't come out and say that because white folks know how to choose their words wisely. Black people, I don't know, from the South, oh, they gonna tell you, "You girl, you've been molested." But listen, it's beyond molestation. No, I was killed, spiritually killed. I was like on the shadow side of myself, of my sign. That's what I became by the time of 11. Like, I was literally dead. I was underground. I literally kept seeing myself underground. Like, they literally killed me. They took something, did some kind of ritual, and they buried me in some kind of a box or something. Like, I was literally killed. But I was still walking around in a shell, and I was experiencing all these personality problems and anxiety and all of this stuff because I was full of entities. I was full of other demons. I was full of everything but myself. The real me was pulled away from me. Like, okay, Amanda Seals. I remember that club with that interview with her in Club Shay Shay, and she said towards the end, she said, "You better be full of yourself, Because if you're not full of yourself, something else is going to fill you. I don't know if she said those exact words, but that's basically the gist of it. And she was right, because it came to a point with so many rituals that my family did, I was no longer full of myself, meaning that I completely lost my self confidence. I completely lost myself. They took me out. They took the real me out and put her somewhere else, like they buried her underground. And I was full of demons. I was full of entities. And that's why I can never, it seemed like I had autism. It seemed like I had Asperger's, because I did not know how to communicate with people. Because the real me was buried underground. I was a bunch of entities. I had a bunch of personality. I was a bunch of entities. And so when I talk to those folks, say, you don't have autism. You've been through trauma. You got, like, I have to get my soul back. I have to, like, my, not my real soul, but still my who I am was as a little girl. That girl, she need to come back. They purposely took her away from me. They separated me from her. They separated me. Like, women go through that when they go through abuse and stuff like that. Like little girls who get raped and stuff and whatever, they get separated from themselves too. And that's why, especially a lot of brown women, that's why they seem to be kind of crazy. I don't want to use that word, but they seem to be like, it's like they ain't there because they're kind of dead. Like they're kind of dead. Like stuff happens as a when they were a little girl that separated them from that child, and that child is lost somewhere, and they grown up in this body in this shell, and that girl is somewhere else, and they have a bunch of demons up in them. I'm like, hey, it's just what it is. They have a bunch of entities up in them, and they are not themselves. Now, because I realized that, I was able to bring myself back and ground myself back into my body. But the thing is that I never left. That's what I learned dealing with the shadow work with my Saturn return and my dark night of the soul, is that I never left. That's what I learned. I never left. Just because all those things happens, it's all, listen, like it's all parts of the subconscious mind. And when you realize that you never left, all of it is you, then you never left your body, and everything becomes one, and you get back into love. You love your enemies. At the end let me end this with saying, that's what loving your enemies is about. Love your enemies. Once I realized I never left, I was always me. But this is all of a part of an experience, getting to learn my entire self, get back into love frequency. Love your enemies. Self-acceptance, because they're not really your enemies, they're all you. So it's more like self-acceptance. And with that being said, that's how I'm going to end it, and I will talk later.